of a sudden we've been really busy too, which is kind of neat. I guess everybody. Well, I just got my COVID shot today, my second one, and I think people with that happening, people are loosening up and they're actually going places now.
Which one did you get?
Chuck,
Mine's
this
the Pfizer.
Chuck, this Dave. I have to ask, what kind of stuff is coming in?
Well, today, actually last night about 7 o'clock, a very large jukebox came in that must have come out of some honky tonk somewhere. It has a rather colorful group of records in the thing. Not Hammerland, Hallicrafter shortwave radio, a really nice one, very early one, showed up in the last day or so. Trying to think what else showed up.
So it's not all Dumont stuff coming in. It's
no. We have a lot of Dumont stuff. I don't know that we've got the biggest collection of it, but we got a lot of Dumont, mostly because we got the Telecruiser. But no, well, you'll see pictures of the museum here in a few minutes, and it's a very eclectic collection. There's something for everyone. Anything from an Edison phonograph to a Zenith high definition TV camera. Did you know Zenith actually made some HD TV cameras?
Yep.
They made 4 of them. Supposedly they spent $400,000 a piece for the things.
You talking about the Bosch camera?
Yeah, it was made by BTS actually.
Well, yeah, Fernseh made it in Germany. I've got one.
You got one? Okay, well, you got the mate.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think mine came from Bell Labs. Yeah, I got the Bell Labs one.
Well, this one supposedly, this one came from Chuck Ferris. And it supposedly was used
you're a little off on the price. That originally cost $800,000.
Well, I'd heard 400, but at any rate, it was a lot of money, whatever it was.
Yeah,
I went to an NAB show.
Yeah, Bell Labs told me it was almost $1 million when they bought it.
Really? Wow. Well, I went to an NAB show where they had some on display, and Zenith had this giant display with a huge projection screen in HD that looked like a full basketball court, and it sounded like a full basketball court. You could hear the tennis shoes squeaking on the court. It was pretty amazing. That was back 1992 or something like that.
John Turner, a couple of years ago, I was at a New Jersey Antique Radio Club meeting with a GoPro camera, and one of our members is one of the guys who used to run Bell Labs, and he was looking at it and looking at it and looking at it, and finally he said, you know, I bought an HD camera once for Bell Labs. He says, I paid $1 million for it.
Bell Labs had a small group, and they bought a Panasonic camera and projector. They were not any type of a standard that we know. It was 1035 line, but it was 59 hertz vertical, 60 hertz vertical, but the camera was not, the horizontal scan was not standardized in anything that we use later. But that stuff wound up over at Belcor, and it just got faded away. I think they just got rid of it as junk.
And back in the day, I got to play with something called Muse by Sony and Toshiba, if you remember that system.
Oh, yeah, multiple sub-Nyquist encoding.
Exactly. Ate up 3 channels worth of bandwidth on our system.
What was the date of that technology?
Say again?
What was the date of that technology?
1987.
Say mid-80s.
I think I remember it. I was a rep in the audio video industry for 27 years, from 1981 until I retired. I vaguely remember it.
Yeah, I did a big NAB demo in 1988, and NHK came and brought all their Muse equipment with them, and they had a 6 megahertz system. It wasn't designed to do that. It was supposed to be 8 or 10 megs, but they built one for the FCC. And it just looked terrible.
Really?
Yeah, at NAB, their equipment used 3-phase power, and it was so unbalanced. It was like 80 amps, 40 amps, and 20 amps. It ran behind the Zenith booth.
Yeah,
we had it was like
when we had to move those cables. Yep, we had to take those cables and reroute them outside the booth.
Yeah, because monitors in the Zenith booth were getting continuous degaussing, and the picture looked like it was under
Yeah.
the water.
Okay, but I remember your booth, and you guys had a whole pile of consumer receivers set up in a matrix, and they weren't shielded very well either.
Chuck Azar here, just joining. Chuck Azar joining.
Hi, Chuck.
Well,
Hi.
shall we let's get started?
Sure. I will mute my mic.
Yeah. Let's get everybody to mute their mics that isn't talking, because we had some chatter going on in the background during this last discussion.
Got it.
Well, now that we're started, Steve, I'll mute everybody and then you just unmute yourself.
I gotcha. Okay. Well, good evening. Welcome everybody to our March meeting. Somebody mentioned earlier that had noticed, I guess Chuck was saying that more people are coming out of the woodwork now. They feel more comfortable about COVID. I've had both my shots, and I certainly do. And I notice it out here, just plus the weather is getting nicer. That's part of it too. But yeah, there are people everywhere. The traffic is terrible out here again. So we're going to get back to normal at some point. Let's see. Get my agenda up here. I'm going to give my standard pitch for museum memberships. I think we're up to almost 140. They keep rolling in, which helps, of course, a major source of income for us. So consider becoming a member. You can do it on the left side panel of our web, any page on our website. The other thing I wanted to mention is that we have scheduled a swap meet and silent auction at the museum on Saturday, June 5th. And details are on the website and on Facebook. The museum has about 50 sets that have been donated that are surplus. We're going to put them in the silent auction. Anyone else have anything they want to put in the silent auction, we're going to require that you do it before the event, because we're just not going to be staffed and set up for having a last minute rush of stuff. And it's going to be in the museum parking lot and in the warehouse. The museum will be open. I'm sure then there will still be COVID restrictions, and whatever they are at the time, we will be following them. No charge, either to show up or to sell. We just thought it would be nice to do this to finally get something physical where people can get back together. As I said, the details are on the website. Tonight, I'm going to talk about the Dumont Royal Sovereign. Can you turn Larry on? He's that Samsung.
Yeah, let me make sure I shut him off accidentally because I didn't realize who he was last month. Larry. Well,
Blue shirt.
well, Larry, if Larry starts talking, he should pop on. Larry, are you there?
He's in the blue shirt.
Yeah, but he has to say something I'm going to.
He's muted.
Yeah, his mic is muted.
There he is.
I just put him on. Larry, your microphone is off. Larry, your microphone is still muted. Hey, we must be on a Zoom meeting.
There we go.
There we go. You got me?
Hey, good
Hey,
evening, Larry.
good evening, everyone.
Good to see you. I've been talking to you, but I haven't seen you for a month.
That might be a good thing. I don't know.
Nah. As usual, Larry is doing a great job keeping the museum going and welcoming visitors through and so forth. Tonight, I'm gonna talk about the Royal Sovereign. So Larry, if you could aim the camera at it.
Will do.
Get started. This is a fascinating set. I think most of you know about it. Dumont had a history from the beginning of making larger than normal CRTs. Their pre-war sets, their standard set in all their sets they sold were 14-inch electrostatic deflection. But they also made a 20-inch set. I don't think any of them survived, but we have pictures of the CRT. And again, it's electrostatic deflection, big bulbous thing. So after the war, they continued the tradition. They made the 20 AP4, and a bunch of their sets use that tube. The Dumont Custom and a bunch of the others, that's a magnetic tube. And that was, I think, a 50 or 60 degree deflection tube. Well, in 1951, they built this set, which is a 30-inch diagonal tube. It's a metal tube, and I'll show it to you after we finish looking at the set. And it was really an engineering marvel. It's a 90-degree deflection tube, which is beyond the state of the art at the time. Uses 20 kilovolts, produces a nice, bright, clear picture. Sort of difficult to set up because the deflection coil barely deflects the surface of the tube. So you've got to be very, very careful in aligning it, or you'll have shadow, dark areas in one corner or another. The set has a vertical chassis. Actually, it has two chassis. The main chassis has all the RF audio video circuits on it, and the power supply chassis has two separate power supplies, one for the low voltage, around 300 volts. It's a monster with two 5U4s. Transformer weighs a ton. Well, the whole set weighs a ton. And then on that chassis also is the deflection, a second power supply that generates the 20 kilovolts for the CRT. It's a flyback power supply. Two 6BG6s in parallel for the horizontal sweep. And an interesting thing about this set is that it has circuitry in it to shut down the high voltage in case the either sweep fails in order to avoid burning the CRT. It uses Larry, zoom in on the tuner.
Just let me know any particular spot you want me to go to.
To the tuner.
Okay.
To your right. There you go. It uses their induct tuner that they used in all of their sets through about that time. I think it cost, if I remember right, I think it sold for about $2,000 or $2,500. I have no idea what that is in today's dollars, but it was certainly a top of the line set. There are maybe a dozen of them that survive today. I have no idea how many were made, but it wasn't a major production item. Larry, you want to move it? Well, before anybody have any questions about this before we move over to look at the CRT?
Yeah, I always wanted to know, what was that added knob below the tuner panel?
That was UHF.
Oh,
For a provision for UHF.
that's not factory though.
That's not factory.
Hey, Steve,
Yeah.
that $2,000 in 1951 is worth, I believe, over $20,000 today.
Wow.
I've seen price sheets from Dumont, from 51, 52, and the RA119A was sold. I think they were held in inventory for quite some time, and they were discounted at one point, but I think they started out at $500.
Well, if we don't have any more comments, Larry, why don't you move into the next row and look at the,
Well, I got a comment.
yeah,
I have one, an RA119A. I think a lot of you guys know that. I was the one who did the conversion with a 27 RP4.
oh, that's right, yeah.
And runs good, but I do have a problem with the high voltage chassis. There is I forget the name of the circuit. It's basically a voltage regulation circuit, and I had messed around with it wrong, and I had to replace a tube. And when I put a high voltage probe on the second anode, it starts up at 20K, and then it kind of falters and just sort of drops to around 19, 18.5, and just sort of stabilizes there. And something's not quite right. I wonder if anybody had an opinion on that.
We've never had any issue with that circuit, so I don't really have any ideas for you.
Yeah, I probably messed something up. I'll have to go in it.
Could it possibly be that the 27-inch, could it possibly be that the 27-inch conversion draws more current from the high voltage?
I didn't have that problem before. I'll tell you, it's amazing how straightforward that conversion was. I didn't have any problems with deflection. I think I changed one wire round resistor to get the adjustment to fill the tube, but that was it. It was a very, very easy swap.
Steve, is that set operating in the museum?
It was up until just before I left town. So I'm coming back in a couple of weeks, and that's on my list to get it going again. Yeah, it worked for a long time.
What happened?
I don't know. No picture. All of the sets in our museum, we have the sound disabled because otherwise somebody will turn the knob up. And so I don't know if the sound works on that in the set or not, but the picture just wasn't there one day. It's a mess to work on, a real mess.
This is the only thing I can get to work.
Well, better than nothing.
Yeah. That's Steve.
Okay, Larry, you got the CRT.
Yes.
There it is. You see it's metal cone. Has a standard neck on it. The gun is nothing unusual about the gun. But as I say, an engineering marvel for its time. Hopefully, when Nick gets going with his rebuilding, we'll be able to rebuild them. It should be no different from any other tube of that era. And I know of a bunch of dud tubes around.
Well, I have the remains of two tubes. One that was necked and the other one with an intact front glass. Is it possible that you guys could make a composite out of two into one good tube and rephosphor it and then evacuate it and all that good stuff?
Maybe someday.
Okay.
Rephosphoring is way down the road. The first step is just getting to be able to, rebuild the guns. And Nick is getting closer on that. He's not ready yet, but he does plan to be doing it at some point.
Right.
Okay. We didn't have a topic this last time, so thought maybe we just have an open discussion. If there's something, anybody has a topic they want to bring up that people would like to talk about.
Maybe the topic. I'll start. I noticed that a lot of the younger guys who are getting involved on some of the Facebook pages have a hankering for some of the later sets that we, guys like us typically turn our noses up on, sets from the 60s, even the 70s and the early 80s now. I've just sort of noticed a lot of activity on Facebook.
Yep.
Yes.
I mean, I wouldn't give those sets house room, but I guess nostalgia is where you seek it, or what time frame you happen to exist.
Look at it from the point of view of a 20-something year old. Any set with a big old CRT in it looks pretty old and funky now.
It is.
Well,
Or class screen.
the other appeal of it is they're cheap. You can pick up, you can get them for free.
Also,
whereas
the
if you want to
cabinets are
get
a
something
good
from the 40s, you might pay $100 for it. And so for people who are just starting out, this is a great way.
We don't use them for the same reasons either. We
Right.
play video games on them.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We're
they
not just
play
watching The
Pong.
Wizard of Oz.
And
What is the status of the TRK 40?
The
Or,
you talking about TK41?
yes, I'm sorry.
Okay, there has been some progress on that finally. Barry Bennett, who runs a shop that builds custom video trucks, has had our camera head for some time and has finally gotten around to start working on it. First thing he discovered was that the optics in it are trash, which is not good. But last week he came and took our spare head that we have, took it back up to his place and discovered that they look pretty good. And he's in the process of getting advice on how to clean the optics. So he's finally getting going on the project, and between the two heads, we hope to have something going. I think he's going to use some of the original equipment that, at first, some of the original support equipment, but also use some modern stuff to get it generating pictures, and then gradually get the original stuff going. So we're making some progress. I'm hoping by this fall that we may have something going.
I'm loving the tour by Larry.
Great. Yeah, he does a good job.
He's wandering around.
Oh, is he still wandering around? Oh, you're watching him now.
Oh, hey. I have a question if I can.
Go ahead.
Well,
No,
okay. First time visitor here. Just got an email on the Amateur Radio Repair Groups IO, and I want to say this is the museum out in Ohio, which I believe it is. I visited there once or twice on the way out to Dayton, and I got a little collection here of new visitors, and I don't know if anybody could make use of them or not. I have no idea where I got them. They've just been sitting.
When
in
you
the
say
desk
new
drawer
Vista,
here.
do you mean CTC 19 or?
Whatever.
Yeah, what model? Okay, what's the part number on it?
Oh, now I got to get some glasses on.
Are you talking about the tube, like the tubes or the TV sets?
Yeah, if you
No,
got
it's an
Are you
early,
talking
like an
about the
early
tubes?
transistor.
Yeah.
if you've got 7586s, that would be interesting because that's the front end of most of the RCA quad machines.
Yeah, this one's RCA and it says 048. Another one here. Looks like it's got it's got 8-09.
And those sound like production dates or something rather than the tube
That
numbers.
almost did, but that's the only number on. I got one here that's
Huh.
got no marking on it at all that I can see.
It's not gonna help.
No, right.
Yeah, here's another one that says 4-39. Just says RCA New Vista 4-39.
Hold it up to the camera.
Oh.
You got to speak to get your picture up on the screen.
Okay,
Dave.
let
There you
me
go.
let me talk, and that's all it's showing.
Huh.
You got a problem. I won't tell you what my wife did to my old vacuum tubes when she decided to clean them for me.
Look right on the end of it, on the top, to see if there's a number stamped in the metal.
Oh wow, yeah, this one does. Now I got to get better glasses. I'll be back. Let me find a magnifying glass.
Okay.
If it was TV, wouldn't that be 6CW4?
Depends on the market. The broadcast equipment use 7580.
You know,
We're still getting a good museum tour here.
Guys,
I don't know if
for a
Steve, you
moment.
made a comment or not, but we have that swap meet that we're going to be throwing in June, the first Saturday in June.
I did at the beginning of the meeting. I'll just
Okay.
repeat it again quickly. June 5th, Saturday, 10 to 3. There'll be a silent auction too, primarily of sets that we have, surplus ones. But if anyone has anything they want to put in the silent auction, they need to get the information to us before the event. No charge.
We're hoping to see lots of good stuff, guys. So I know I've talked to a lot of collectors, and I've heard a lot of interest about people coming out. It should be a good day of festivities. So it'd be great to kind of see everybody, and we'll be following local guidelines, but it seems to maybe they'll be slightly eased up a little bit. So we should still all be able to at least get within the vicinity of each other and have a good time.
Yep.
Are we doing anything, getting back to the newer generation, to reach out, vis-a-vis their Facebook pages to let them know about this upcoming event? Sort of to attract a new generation of members?
I'm fairly plugged. I'm 29. I'm fairly plugged in with a lot of the younger guys, and I've done a pretty good job of reaching out. If anybody else on here is younger or older or whoever, please, there's a link on the ETF website. Please share it, young or old, whoever. We're not ageist, so please. If we were ageist, we'd be screwed.
We do post multiple notices on about, I guess we're up to about 15 Facebook groups now.
Okay, good.
And on Video Karma, we're on the Rectangular Tube forum. So we're doing everything we can to publicize to that group.
Guys, I'm new on board. Can I get a moment?
Okay, sounds like the discussion has sort of tailed off. Why don't we move on? I think that,
Steve?
Yeah.
I have a follow-up to that eBay scam that I mentioned during last month's meeting. I gave the seller negative feedback.
Yeah.
And within hours, I got yet another story. He now claims that the original radio had been sold to somebody else via another sales medium, despite the fact he had already told both eBay and me that the radio had been shipped to me. And then, to add insult to injury, he offered me $15 to change my feedback. When I refused,
a lot of snakes out there.
Did you get your money back?
Yeah, I did. When I refused, he offered me 20. Now I am the former ethics officer for my branch at the employer I just retired from. You can imagine my response.
Right.
I would have lined him up out back and shot the guy.
The problem is he probably lives in Nigeria.
Netherlands.
Netherlands. Oh. All right. Mike Molnar, I think, had some interesting news that he wanted to talk about.
I'm on another phone. I'm going to start the video from there. If you can pick me up.
Yeah, we got you.
And let's see. I think I'm coming in there as Mr. Mike.
Let me
Mike
see.
2.
No, Mike 2 is what you're talking on, right, Mike?
Stationary. I can't move it to the.
Hold on. Mike 2 is where your audio's coming in.
How about now?
Hold on. I got to find Mr. Mike in the list here. Here we go. Hang on. Mr. Mike does not have video running.
How about now?
Yeah.
Yep, he's got video.
We see your face. Yes.
Okay. So now I've got to turn that around. Let's see. There we go. Let's see. So start with a little
recap of where we were.
I've been restoring this for
since bit around Christmas.
And after last month,
Mike, hang on for a second, please. I'm going to shut off Mike 2 because it sounds like you're coming in on 2 devices.
Okay.
All right, try it again. Can we hear you on Mr. Mike?
let's try it now.
Yeah, much better. Okay, keep going.
So when I heard the next couple days from Chuck Azzolina, who was watching the replay of the meeting, and at one point I had gone behind the TV to show all the tubes lit up, and his comment was, "Those 12 BY7s look really bright," and you know I'm surprised he picked up the difference on the over the phone. But I said, well, he mentioned that he had worked on some monochrome sets that to get more performance out of a 12 BY7, they had bumped up the filament voltage. And he asked if anything like that was done on the Zenith. And I really didn't know. So I went back and checked. And sure enough, the filament voltage on a 12 BY7 was 7.8, which is, you know, into like meltdown, I would guess, on these tubes. So I went to take a look at the diagram to see if it was anything intentional, and it wasn't. It turned out the way that Zenith did the filament voltages kind of follows this diagram of a 12.6 volt center tap, and then 2 strings of 6.3 volt tubes. And when I measured what's going on some of the other tubes, a bunch were 7.8, and then the other side of that was 4.8. I was getting multiple symptoms, all caused by one bizarre problem, something I had never really seen. It's got to be something in the winding. And what I did was went to good old eBay and found someone selling just a 12.6 center tap transformer. I think this is this one will take 20 amps, and I've got it patched in. And all of a sudden, a lot of problems started going away. The end of that result was when you first turned it on, it was still working really bizarrely because I had tweaked so many things to try to get it to work right with the wrong filament voltages. So I pretty much went back to scratch and started to build it up, and basically doing pretty good. Still got to do, it looks like I'll have room down below under the power supply chassis to permanently mount that transformer, which would save the cost of having a new power transformer built. But still little things to go through. I've got to tweak the color oscillator once in a while to get the flesh tones right. But so far, I'm really happy with the progress. I can actually leave it running now and go in the other room for a minute without checking where the fire extinguisher is. So that's always positive. And that's my little report. A bizarre problem, something I'd never seen before, but glad to get it behind me. And with the thanks of the last meeting.
Mike, that's to me, that's an amazing story.
Great stuff.
The whole thing from the beginning that somebody noticed that the tubes were too bright, and then the fault itself is one that I've never seen. So
Yeah, good eyes on Chuck Azzolina's part, huh?
it was a Chuck.
Yeah, excellent. He's definitely getting a beer on me when we get together for the meeting next time.
It looks really good. Hard to complain about that picture. So.
Yeah, no, it's doing fine. And, you first bring it on the flesh tone, right? But you give it a little warm, it comes in.
You should
So-
take a lot of load off of that power transformer now, so it should run cooler too.
Yeah, and you know, even with the problem, it didn't run hot. I mean, I put a temperature gauge on it. It only went about 10 degrees over room temperature, even with the short in it. So whatever it wasn't that bad to hurt the whole transformer.
I'm not familiar with this set. Was the picture tube rebuilt?
No, it's, I believe, original. I'm not the original owner, obviously, but I believe the Zenith used Roland 15 GP22s, and they seem to have held up.
Well, how's the balance in the emissions on it?
I haven't put it on a Beltron. I don't have a hookup for that, but
okay.
it levels up pretty good. The monochrome, you know, it gets a nice grayscale.
Good.
Well, thanks, Mike. That's really interesting.
I'm glad to.
On to Mr. Conrad's presentation.
So I need to unmute my microphone, probably be a pretty good place to start. Yeah, I'm Chuck Conrad. For those of you who don't know me, I am the guy who thought opening the broadcast museum in Kilgore, Texas, of all places, would be a good thing. And I've had people ask, well, why in the hell did you do Kilgore? It's because I live real nearby. And I had somebody at NAB convention one day say, well, why didn't you do this in Los Angeles? Because they're building this new film thing in museum in Griffin Park, and you could be right across the street and it'd be awesome. And I said, well, what's their budget? And the guy said, oh, I think it's $56 million. I said, well, there's your real answer right there, because it's a lot cheaper in Kilgore. But I'm going to click on share screen, and we're going to see what happens if I actually push the right button and click on share. And this is our logo for the Texas Broadcast Museum. And we've been in business now, we've been open to the public for a little over 4.5 years. And today we were really, really busy, which was really amazing. Actually, we were really busy yesterday too. Who would have thought we needed a broadcast museum in Kilgore? Kilgore is kind of an unusual town, though. It's an oil town, and it's where the big oil discoveries were done in the 1930s. It has a lot of interesting history all by itself. But I have a lot of history too, and I'll kind of try to tell you how I got here to this this event. If I can make my computer go to the next screen. Doesn't seem to want to do that. We'll try this. Well, we seem to be locked up in PowerPoint. How fun. Oh, well, there I am. And I think I was about 11. I've always been interested in TV cameras and TV in general and stuff. These are some of my friends in elementary school. That's me right there. We had built this box camera on a really rickety platform, and we're in a parade when this picture was taken. So it shows you how warped I am, and so are my friends. This is Ron Hurst and his brother Rick Hurst. Ron actually had a career in radio and TV as well, so it sort of grew. But when I was about 14, I was doing all kinds of strange things. I had a novice ham license, and I had a pirate radio station, which is, I think you see me there at. I also, when I was in high school, worked at a TV repair shop, which was a Philco dealer. And that was a lot of fun because Philco Predictus were coming in left, right, and center. And my vocabulary improved. It gained a whole new bunch of words from my boss who's trying to change the picture tubes in the thing. Because I mean, we got probably one Predicto a week. I can't tell you how many I took to the town dump, but there was a lot of them. But after school, I ended up I worked in TV stations, and I ended up somehow getting captured by space aliens or something. I ended up with a career in the live sound business, doing sound for concerts and conventions. This is one of the first ones I did. It's James Taylor. I worked for a company called Showco in Dallas, and eventually started my own company. We'll get to that later, but I learned a lot. This was about a 32 or 3 year career doing this kind of stuff, but I was always working with TV and radio people. So the interest happened. One of the things I got sent out to do was an Alice Cooper show. I didn't know. They told me Alice was a folk singer and it was a girl. Well, I assumed Alice was a girl. And we pulled up to the loading dock at the Civic Center in Oklahoma City one day to do this Alice Cooper show. And there's a bunch of people sitting on the top of a Ryder truck shooting birds. And they all had long hair, and it was kind of interesting. I'm kind of going, this looks a little scary to me. At any rate, I asked them what they were doing, and they said, well, we're just getting some birds so we can feed the snakes. And I'm going, well, that's really special. Anyway, they started unloading things like gallows and an electric chair and stuff like that. And finally, I met a guy who introduced himself as Vince. And Vince looked like the road manager to me. He was dressed nicely and had one of those Halliburton briefcases that was real popular in the early 70s, had pressed jeans on and stuff. And I asked him, well, is Alice going to come out and do sound check? They were doing a sound check with the band. He said, oh, no, Alice doesn't come out until much later. And that was Alice. So it was kind of an interesting affair to do it. But I ended up doing sound for a group called Rare Earth. Maybe you'll remember them. I just want to celebrate another day of living and stuff like that.
They were good.
They actually put me into the sound business. They asked if one day if I wanted to go in the sound business myself, and I said, well, I don't have any money. And they said, well, we do. And they end up backing my company, which is called Crossroads Audio. It's still in business, but I sold it about 20 years ago or so. That is my original equipment wife right over here, Diane. And this is a prototype speaker box that I built so we could have a very compact PA system that was really, really loud. I mean, this thing was a screamer. Each box had its own amplifier in it, which at the time was revolutionary. Nobody did that. Now every PA system you see at a concert has powered speakers. Of course, it's a little easier to do, but each one of these had a Crown DC300 inside the thing. But the deal was you could stack this stuff up, plug a power cable into it and an audio drive cable for highs and lows. The crossover was in the console. We could be set up in 30 minutes, and we did that. And the promoters really, really liked that. Plus, it was really
good crossovers.
I'm sorry. Yeah, it was electronic crossover. Yeah, it was an electronic crossover. I used one made by a company called Spectrasonics. It was in Salt Lake City, I think. It was a pretty good crossover. That was one of the problems with a lot of the early PA systems, including the ones that Showco had. They couldn't understand why they were blowing out high frequency drivers, and the crossover they were using in the thing would cross over at 800 cycles, but it came back up about 400 cycles down to DC or so. And high frequency drivers do not like that at all.
Hey, Chuck?
Yeah.
Was that a big Cliff logo in the background of the photo on the right? Just before you... Yeah, is that a big Cliff logo in the background?
No, it's KLI something or other, but I don't think. Well, you know, it might be actually. This might be Dallas Convention Center Arena. I really don't remember where the picture was taken. I know it was a Rare Earth show, and all these arenas look kind of the same. So that might actually be Dallas Convention Center. I didn't have much time to take pictures when I was doing this, so I don't have a whole lot of pictures, which is kind of too bad. But you know, when you're in the midst of stomping out forest fires, you sometimes don't think about taking pictures. And we didn't have cell phones either. So, but I ended up going out on the road with Cat Stevens from 1971 to 1978. And this guy paid a lot of bills. He was an interesting guy, to say the least. I liked his music a lot. We built lots of equipment for him. And he was, like I say, he paid a lot of bills. And he made made a lot of things actually that have happened today possible because of I got to pay off my house and didn't have my car was paid for and stuff like that. That really helps when you're young. Also did sound for Arlo Guthrie. He was probably the most fun to work with. Arlo is, if you've ever heard Alice's Restaurant, which you probably have, everybody I think here is pretty much of the age to know Arlo. He's not putting on an act at all. He really is this way. He's like that all the time. He's a very funny guy, very quick-witted, also good musicians. Did sound for Charlie Pride for a long time. Found out he cheated at poker. That wasn't real good. But other than that, he was real popular, so we did that. But somewhere along the line, the Republican convention came to Dallas, and we did a lot of ancillary sound for that. But we still did outdoor concerts. This is a Willie Nelson 4th of July picnic, for instance, in Lukenbach, Texas. You've heard of Lukenbach, Willie Whalen and the boys, and this is what we did. This is more like the Vomit Fest or something, because I mean, everybody, it was all day long in the broiling heat on 4th of July in Lukenbach. It's super hot out there. Everybody's consuming giant quantities of beer and other inebriants. And by midnight or so, when the thing got over, it's just a whole bunch of people passed out all over the mud and goop, and it's horrible loadout. The snake cable was just nasty at that point to wind up with. That was the last thing we do, in fact.
What year was that?
Well, as far as I know, I don't know if they're still doing it, but with that year, that picture was probably 1995 or so. I don't know. We did it for years. And right after that, we would do a Mary Kay Cosmetics convention for 3 weeks in the Dallas Convention Center arena. Somewhere along the line during the Republican convention, we started doing a lot of stuff indoors for parties and events and things, even Nancy Reagan luncheons and stuff like that. And I noticed that we could be indoors. It was air conditioned, and the food was much better, and you could go home and sleep, which was kind of a novelty too. This is a show for American Airlines that was mostly just for, all these airlines. We had American Airlines and Southwest were both good customers. A whole bunch of other people, Miller Beer, Piper Aviation, Dr. Pepper, a lot of convention work. We even did NAB a couple of times when it was in Dallas. And I kind of like this better, but we still did concerts. And in fact, here's one where a few of my best friends showed up in Austin, Texas, in a place called Zilker Park. We had a brand new PA system that we'd never tried before, and the thing was amazing. But this was Fleetwood Mac, I believe, among others. But the park went on about a half a mile back. It was crazy amount of people in the place. It was a free concert. But these were to be avoided if at all possible, although they paid pretty well, so that always helped. But meanwhile, I was collecting weird stuff, and my garage started looking like this. Now, it looks pretty neat there in the picture, but I assure you there were places that were not neat. It was probably staged somewhat. The camera that's right over here, you'll see later in the museum. This was actually, it's a GE Image Orthicon, 4.5-inch Image Orthicon camera. It was there when Lee Harvey Oswald was shot. I didn't know that when I got it, but that's a whole other story. Somewhere along the line, this little jewel came to visit me. That camera, actually, I loaned the 6th floor museum because I wanted to use it for a special exhibit. And they said, you wouldn't want a TV mobile unit, would you? And I went, well, I don't know. At the time, I'd owned 2 buses and a whole bunch of trucks. So I wasn't too intimidated by something big. And they said, well, we know where this is. Do you want it? And it turns out it's a Dumont Telecruiser. It's the very first one they ever sold. You'll see a better picture of it later. But in the it wasn't air conditioned originally. And in the 1960s, they updated it and put some old Marconi cameras in it out of their other mobile unit and put this lovely air conditioner on the top of it. It was the most butt ugly thing I have ever seen in my life, I think. The funny thing is it worked, and it would go really cold. I have a radio station. This is a lobby of where I'm sitting, actually, just right outside. And this is when you come in, and there's no longer a TK11 camera sitting here, but a lot of this stuff has gone to the museum, but it still looks more or less the same. You wouldn't think anything was missing if you came in, if you didn't know what it looked like before. But at the radio station, I had these little kids come in one day. They wanted to see a radio station, and I thought, well, that's nice. But it's basically some Dell computers and a couple of audio consoles, not too interesting. So I cranked up this Victrola over here, with a very politically incorrect record on the thing, and showed them how that worked. And this little kid with the red hair says to me, "Why are you cranking that?" And I went, "Well, it was built about 1905, and back then most people didn't have electricity." And I said, the kid goes, "They didn't have electricity? Are you kidding me? They didn't have electricity?" I said, "No, very few people had cars. Electricity was pretty unusual in a house. You got to take a bath every Saturday night in the kitchen, whether you needed it or not, or wanted it." I said, cars were different. Nobody had a phone. And the kid goes, "Wait a minute. They didn't have phones. How'd they get on the internet?" Good question. I was actually, he kind of stunned me because I wasn't expecting that. And I think I blurted out that Al Gore hadn't invented it yet. But he's never known a time without some kind of device in his hand. These kids don't know. I mean, you grew up with with an iPad or something, or a Leapfrog or something in your hand, and they just really don't know that there was a time without that. So we ended up met another guy in Kilgore named Warren Willard, and he likes to collect gravitationally enhanced devices too. He prefers things in large walnut or mahogany cabinets and stuff, especially radios, but Victrolas, TVs, things like that. And we got together. We discovered we were both equally sick, and ended up starting the Texas Broadcast Museum. And this is what it looks like today, at least pretty close to today. Yeah, the grass is even cut. We actually cut the grass just the other day. This thing used to be a car dealership. It was a Chevrolet dealership back in 1949. It was built, so it kind of fits motif-wise with the rest of what we're doing. When you come in the front door, this is what it looks like. There's a ticket booth to your right where we try to get a donation or something. There's a talk radio set here, a whole ton of TV cameras. Last count, there's almost 100 cameras on display, and there's a whole bunch more that are not on display. We have a serious storage problem. Here's a little video of what it looks like when you come in. We have a lot of film editing equipment because a lot of TV was on film, of course, in its early days. There's a working film chain, Ampex 1200 videotape machine, a 1-inch machine, portable machine. This is a Dumont Electronicam, which we got from Chuck Ferris, incidentally. But everything was on film back then, and the Electronicam I'll get into in a minute, but it's a very interesting device. Every TV station I worked at had film editing equipment. I worked at one station where if the film broke and you were the projectionist, you were not allowed to splice the film, even though there was this splicing table right behind you. You had to call the film department, and they came out and spliced your spot reel. It's like, well, that's really efficient. But most of the stations I worked at some little UHF stations where you did everything. It was actually a great learning experience to go to a place where you did everything. Here's the Electronicam. This is Jackie Gleason thought this up, of all things. He was doing the Honeymooners show, and he combined a TV camera with a film camera. And so whenever the TV camera sees, the film camera records on film, because prior to this, everything was on was done by kinescope recordings, where essentially you have a camera recording off the screen of a quote high resolution monitor. And they look awful, frankly, and these look really good. If you go look on some of the YouTube videos with Jackie Gleason's Honeymooners shows, you'll see at the end it says filmed on the Dumont Electronicam system, and they really look okay. They had 3 cameras in their shoot, and they would make a kinescope so they could edit it on Monday morning, and then send prints out to all their affiliates by bus.
Is that the one with the split lens or the prism?
Yeah, there's a prism in there. That's what this is all about right here, where my cursor is. It's pretty ingenious, really. And we actually have some sales literature for this. And in that, they suggest, rather than using black and white negative film in the camera, there's an Aeroflex camera in this one, but a variety could be put in it, to use color reversal film. They specifically liked, I think it was some Ansco film or something, but at any rate, their idea was that when color TV came out, you can make black and white prints off of that color negative. And then when color TV becomes more common, you'll be able to make color prints of your old show. It's pretty ingenious.
That prism, was that called duoscope?
I don't know. As far as I know, it's just a prism, but I haven't seen anything, but maybe Steve knows. I really don't know. As far as we know, there's only a couple of these left. I think they maybe made 10 or 12 of them ever. When videotape came out, that of course made this completely useless. But
To me, it's interesting that the film camera is forward of the electronic camera. Why was that?
Probably just logistics, to be honest with you. The actual camera is actually back about the same place as the lens opening on the Dumont camera. It's fairly recessed in there. It's not that far out. But basically there's a lens here and there's a prism that splits the image, and a mirror right here that dumps it back into the Image Orthicon camera. It's actually pretty simple when you think about it. And in fact, they used this same idea much later in the film industry so that they could see what the film camera was shooting. They put a Vidicon camera on the eyepiece, and that way everybody could see what they're doing.
Wasn't Jerry Lewis the guy who thought of that?
Yeah, but Dumont actually in their literature suggested doing that when this thing was new in 1953 or so. We know there's one other in the museum. I think it's in South Carolina. And other than that, I don't think it's not complete.
Yeah, there's one at the South Carolina State Museum in Columbia.
Right.
It came from the collection of Dr. Thomas Goldsmith from his days of teaching at Furman University.
Right. And that one, for some reason, though, the viewfinder comes off on these Dumont cameras. And that one, the pictures I've seen of it, does not have the seam right here, nor does it have a connector. So I think that we actually have the CCU, the camera control unit, everything for this thing. I don't know that we'd ever get it working. It would be an interesting task to do so. But as far as I know, those are the only two that have survived. This one we think was used on Captain Video. That's according to Chuck Ferris. So,
hey, Chuck?
Yeah.
The comment about duoscopic, that was another Dumont product that they introduced in the early 50s that was just actually two television sets in one cabinet. So people would watch two different programs at the same time. And
LBJ would have liked that. I think he had one with four, didn't he?
Yeah, right. And it was also apparently used for stereoscopic experiments.
Aha. Well, early 3D TV, I guess. That would be how you do it. Well, let's move on here for a second. We have a working film chain. Most everything you saw on TV was on film in the early days because, well, there was no videotape for a starter. This one's 1960s vintage. It's an Eastman GE camera. It's a four Vidicon color camera. Set of mirrors here that work on compressed air. I have the mirrors wired so it's just straight through because the air compressor will drive you right out of the room. The cylinders leak. They need some O-rings or something. But the projectors actually work. It's just very awkward to switch the mirrors. But you can deflect any of these three projectors into the screen. But you see it's actually making a picture here. So I loaded film on a lot of these things. These Eastman projectors, the RCAs were much better, but almost every place I ever worked had Eastmans, and they eat film and break splices like it's going out of style. But I've actually used this particular one with a film chain here at my house for a while that I was copying. I got really involved in the car club business. And both Classic Car Club of America had a big film library, and the AACA Antique Auto Club of America had a big film library. And I transferred all that to SVHS tape and then made them VHS copies of it. They are in the process now of digitizing all that stuff. So I don't know what's going on with it, but luckily I'm not involved. But this projector served yeoman duty for quite some time. And then we have a videotape machine here. This one came from WTTW in Chicago. I dragged this down. I was going to Chicago a lot, and I rented a U-Haul trailer and put this in the trailer and hauled it behind my car. It wouldn't fit in an enclosed trailer. So it weighs about 1,000 pounds. It was very festive moving it. This particular one was used for experimental stereo TV. You'll see down here, there's a Inovonics record amp record playback amp that's been added to this. They had a special audio head made that was stereo. And the story on this one is that it was used for experimenting with the Zenith DBX stereo TV system that we all enjoyed for quite a while. They would rent time on WTTW after sign off and run music videos on this to see how the stereo TV worked. Pretty good idea, I guess. I haven't had the guts to plug it in. It also needs compressed air because it's a quad machine, 4-head machine, and it needs compressed air and a vacuum to make the heads, make the tape conform around the heads, and for air bearings on the heads, because the heads are moving at some ungodly speed. But it's little, it's lovely, it's not light at all. It really hurts when you, it's got casters on it, and if you hit your little pinky with it, when you're rolling it, it really, really hurts. I can tell you how I know that. It's also a 1-inch machine over here, which worked when it left my house, but it didn't work when the precious smoke came out when we plugged it in. So that is a to be addressed thing, but it's been to be addressed for about 5 years now. So I don't know how soon that will happen. Here's one of our models showing you the lovely Ampex machine. Just for some eye candy, we have a TK11/31. This was in the lobby of my radio station for a long time. We actually have the power supply and the camera control unit and the cables and everything. This is high on the list of stuff to get working. I don't think it'll be too bad. It certainly is easy to access all the parts in it. All the resistors, capacitors are on strips that you can see the one that the smoke came out of. It's no problem at all. And otherwise it's just vacuum tubes. So I think this one will be working. We have fixed the power supply. We've gone through the power supply for it, which has a handle on it, even though it weighs about 85 pounds or something. There's one handle, but that makes it portable. So of course, this handle makes this thing portable too. So, it's all relative. Just like our TVs, you'd buy a TV that weighs 1 billion pounds, but it's got a handle on it. So now it's a portable TV. This is the camera that actually started a lot of this. There was a broadcast museum in Dallas that was quite a good one, actually, and they got in some real financial trouble and couldn't pay the rent, basically, and the landlord foreclosed on them and had a big garage sale. I didn't know anything about their sale, and some guys came into my shop at Crossroads Audio one Monday morning after returning the rental, and they were from one of the local TV stations in Dallas, and said, "Did you go to the big sale?" And I went, "Huh? Sale? What kind of sale are you talking about?" I said, "Well, the broadcast museum went belly up, and they sold a bunch of stuff really cheap." So I went over there at noontime with whatever cash I could round up out of the cash register and stuff, and I bought this. And I think I paid about $100 for it. I really don't remember, but I did not get a dolly or pan tilt head or anything like that. I just got the camera and the lens. I didn't even get lens controllers for it, but I'd worked at KRLD in the news department, so I bought it. I thought it was pretty cool, and started looking for tripods and dollies and things like that, which only led to more TV cameras because I found them attached to a dolly or something. And I'll sell you the dolly, but you got to take the camera with it, that kind of thing. So that's why we have a lot of cameras. But one day when I moved to East Texas, I sold my sound company over 20 years ago. I had to work for the people for a year, which was very awkward. But I took pictures of this stuff before I moved it, and they ended up on the internet, as pictures tend to do. And I got a call from the 6th floor museum in Dallas, which is the Kennedy Assassination Museum in the old school book depository building. It's a good museum. If you're in Dallas, you need to go see it. Anyway, they said, "We understand you have a camera that belonged to KRLD." And I said, "Yeah, I do." He said, "Do you know what it is?" I said, "Well, it's a GE 4.5-inch image orthicon camera. Of course, that's what it says right on the side." And he said, no, that's not what I mean." And I said, "Well, what are you getting at?" And he said, "Well, do you know what it did?" And I said, "Well, when I was there, it was doing church services on Sunday morning and living black and white because the color unit was being used for Dallas Cowboy football games." "Oh, no, that's not what we mean either." He said, "Did you know it was there when Lee Harvey Oswald was shot?" And I went, "No, I didn't, in fact." And they said, "Well, this number 4 up here, we can identify it in some pictures, and we'd like to borrow it for a year." So they did. They came and got it, sent a lady out with an SUV, and we dumped it in the back of the thing, and she hauled it off to Dallas. The next thing I know, I'm going to a grand opening wine and cheese party for a special exhibit they had called Coping with Crisis that was all about how the press dealt with the Kennedy assassination. And that's where I found out about the Dumont Telecruiser. They said, "You wouldn't want a TV mobile unit, would you?" I said, "Oh, maybe." So we'll get into that in a minute. But this thing also went to the Newseum in Washington, D.C. for the 50th anniversary of the Kennedy assassination. You can tell the Newseum's gone out of business. They closed, but they sold their land for a whole bunch of money. Great museum, though. But instead of the Dallas version, they sent a fine arts moving company and also a stack of papers that's probably about that thick, legal stuff to fill out. But at any rate, they sent a fine arts moving company in this really gorgeous Peterbilt truck, bobtail truck with big lift gates and stuff on it. And two guys in white uniforms got out and they had a crate they'd already built for this thing. And they put it in the crate and they padded it all up and they sealed the crate up and they strapped it down inside the truck and drove off back to Washington with just this TV camera in it. And they didn't want the tripod for whatever reason. I have no idea what that cost, but I have a good idea why they went out of business. Some more cameras, RCA TK60, black and white, one of the best black and white TV cameras, certainly the best US built one. This is a Marconi, also uses a 4.5-inch image orthicon. CBS liked these a lot. This particular one was with the Telecruiser when I got it, but it came from Channel 8 in Dallas. They had a whole bunch of them. And this is our baby, which actually you may have seen before. We have two of these now. This is a TK41. This one's serial number 40. So it makes it a pretty early one. It's a svelte 340 pounds. So it's not exactly portable, but they did haul them out anyway. The early ones had 3 camera cables that came out of it, one for red, one for green, and one for blue. It was really basically 3 TK11 cameras inside a box with some optics. That's really what it is. And there's separate cables. It made for a bundle of cables that was about as big around as your leg. So it took 2 guys to operate it. One guy was sitting there pointing the camera and focusing it, and the other guy was dragging the cable around. That was actually a real union job. And we have a couple of nippers here that somebody gave us, and they seem to look okay on top of our RCA color TV. Sadly, this does not work because the CRT is bad. But that seems to be a common problem. I'm not sure how many of these are left. Do you have any idea, Steve? I think you're muted. Oh, well. I can't read lips. There you go.
There you go. I think between 140 and 150. They keep popping up.
I guess maybe 200, but I know they recalled a bunch of them as when they were new. I remember seeing one of these as a kid. Somebody in our town had one. I went and saw Dinah Shore on it. I was very disappointed. But
how many were built?
I don't know, around 3,000 maybe?
Yeah, 4,500, 4,400, I think.
Okay. Well, it was very iconic. It was $1,000, which was a bunch of money back in 1954. We also have a camera control unit for a TK41. Actually, we have all the electronics for one of our TK41s. It's a TK41C, actually, which only used one cable, which was revolutionary, I guess. Different view of the CCU. It's all nice and pretty color-coded anyway. And then these 2 cameras, the GE PE250 on the left that says 1 on it. And actually, these came from Chuck Ferris, both of them. He donated these. And the one on the left was used on Dick Clark's American Bandstand, and the one on the right, the Norelco PC60, was used on the Lawrence Welk show. And there's an odd Kilgore connection to Lawrence Welk. They were Champagne music makers, and they had Lawrence had a champagne lady that uncorked the bottle, among other things. And she was from Kilgore. The first one her name was Alice Weiss Lawn, and she grew up right around the corner from where this museum is and was a Kilgore Rangerette, which is a drill team that's world famous these days. And she got fired. I didn't know anything about Alice at all. One of her relatives brought a picture of her in, and I had to go find out. And doing a little Google, University of Google search on her, I found out that she got fired. And the reason she got fired is because she showed up, she had to bring her own costumes. Lawrence was too cheap to pay for them. And she showed up with a skirt that when she sat down, you could see her kneecap. And he wasn't going to have that kind of scandalous nudity on his family show. So Alice was long gone. It made all the tabloid newspapers, though. One quote, she said, "Well, it didn't pay very well anyway." Oh well. We have a lot of Philco Predictas. Pretty good collection of them here, including one that's working, sort of. That one's actually blown up right there when we were demonstrating it to people. That's always festive when that happens. But as I said, I work for a Philco dealer, and these things are miserable to work on, frankly. And I know a lot of people love them, and they are certainly iconic. There's no doubt about that. But a good TV, well, I'm not real sure. We also have a couple of the Safari all transistor projection TVs. The ads for these say, "It's just like watching the movie theater." Yeah, right. And of course, you could get a TV pretty cheap back then, only $1 down. Another view of the predicted display. Actually, this one, I'm amazed the linearity is not too bad on it, because they frequently are not. And of course, we have tube testers because everybody had to test tubes at one time. The one on the left is from 1932 that I got the cursor over. That says, "Let us test your tubes every 3 months and replace them at least once a year." I got 80-year-old tubes that work fine, so I'm pretty sure it was that's a sales pitch. Of course, we just happen to have a bunch of tubes down here, so when your tube tester says it's weak, we can just fix you right up for $2.85 because it's going to go bad sooner or later. You can count on that. I remember seeing one of these things when I was a kid. I was working at the TV repair shop, and there's a drugstore up the street that had a tube tester, and it had a knob on the back of it that said "Cal," as in calibrate. And apparently, some of them you could set so that the meter read low all the time. Who'd have thought that? More TV cameras, some industrial ones. There's cameras everywhere. Like I said, there's about 100 of them. There's a TK76, which is one of the first portable cameras, Hitachi cameras. This particular camera right here, this GE camera, came from SMU. I went to SMU as a student in college, and I actually ran this camera. So it found me. It was a terrible camera. For some reason, SMU spec'd out a TV studio. It was a pretty nice studio, except it was all black and white. And they spec'd it out about 1960, but they didn't get the money to build it until about 1967 or so. And they insisted on black and white cameras because that's what we ordered. And GE says, "We don't make black and white cameras anymore. We only make color cameras, and we'll give you color cameras." And the idiots at the college refused and said, "No, we want black and white cameras." So they made a special run out of the parts of these things. One of them, not this one, but camera number 3, nobody wanted to use because there's actually a GE industrial Vidicon camera inside the box and a Conrack monitor for a viewfinder, but they put it in the right box. They apparently had the boxes, but they didn't have the rest of the electronics. Just sometimes you just wonder how people come up with this stuff. This audio console here came out of NBC in New York. It was used for NBC Network News at one time. It was made by McCurdy in Canada. And I got it in Muleshoe, Texas. Don't ask me where Muleshoe is, but it's a long way from here. And it must weigh 300 pounds. It's full of transformers, but it actually works. We do have a working, yeah.
Yeah, Chuck, have you checked out the noise level of the McCurdy?
No.
You should.
Well, maybe a pink noise generator or something, but
yeah. Exactly. They make very good pink noise generators, as we found out at WGMS and the other RKO stations.
Okay, well, this one at least came with the instruction manual and the diagrams and everything, and it even says specifically it was built for NBC News. And I think they were using all line level sources in the thing, except for the mic. There's 2 mic channels in the thing that have parametric EQ, and the rest of them are pretty straightforward. So if you're running the output of tape cartridge machines or reel-to-reel machines, it probably wasn't an issue. And it's probably going down telephone lines to AM stations anyway. this little studio is kind of representative of what a studio looked like. This actually works. Everything works. Cart machines work. Tape recorder works. Turntables work. People are amazed to see it work. Actually, it's a lot of fun. We have a radio talk studio too. This old car dealership had a whole bunch of rooms that were perfect to make studios out of. One of them's filled with tape recorders. Got a lot of tape recorders. Actually, they're all over the place. All the stuff's all over the place. But there's kind of a concentration here. There's even an RCA, I think it's called RT101, an Ampex 350, Ampex AG440, and two 440s, a Fostex 8-track machine, all kinds of stuff there. We run it through a Ramza console that somebody gave us and play jingles through this a lot. Kids like to talk to themselves in the microphones, though, so that happens. We don't have as good a nipper as ETF. I mean, that nipper that you got, how could you top, an 8-foot tall dog, but we do have this one, and Chipper beside him looking into a gramophone, or into a Victrola rather. And we usually play a guessing game with visitors about, do you know what his name is? We do events a lot. Well, at least we did, and they're coming back. That's good news. We've got a whole bunch of them. We call this area Studio 4, and it has video projection and a really decent sound system because, well, that's what I did for a living. And we've seated as many as 220 people in here. I don't recommend it with 220 people. It's a real crowd. This is the Texas Radio Hall of Fame induction ceremony. We've done that several times. It's quite an experience to have a couple hundred disc jockeys locked up in one room, if you know what I mean. They call them radio personalities, I believe, but they're heavy in the personality department. But they do like to hear themselves talk. Actually, one guy was up making his acceptance speech at our podium, and he said, well, I'm finally back in a place where I actually know how to run some of this stuff. So another gathering of people. But this is one of the ways we help finance the museum. It's been a little tough this last year because we didn't do any for a whole year. And we're pretty reasonable on our rental rates and stuff, but it really does help to have this. If we can do a couple events a month, it at least pays the electric bill, which is substantial, especially when the air conditioning's on. We have 10 air conditioners that are 4 or 5 ton each in this building. So when there's 3 electric services going into the building. So when the meters are spinning, they really are. Here's the Telecruiser, the way it looks today, a little bit different than it looked in that picture that you saw it with the air conditioner. It originally did not have air conditioning. They put that on in the 1960s. The electronics in it are 1960s vintage. It was updated in the 60s. They put Marconi cameras in it. We actually have a real Dumont camera over here somewhere. Funny thing is, somebody sent me an email one day and said, there's a lady in Fort Worth that's got a Dumont camera in a garage sale. Oh, sure she does. I'm sure it's right next to the Tupperware lids or something, but I called her up and sure enough she did. And I went over and bought it, and we had to haggle over prices for quite a while. Her father was a ham radio operator, and somehow he had it. It looked absolutely terrible. It didn't have a tripod or pan tilt head or lenses, and it was painted some hideous metallic blue. But anyway, I ended up with it for $25, so I thought the price was right. I got out of there as quick as I could when she finally said $25. This is what the interior looks like. This was used during the Kennedy assassination coverage, and on this monitor, you can't see it here, but we run a video that Channel 8 in Dallas, who owned this thing, that was actually shot out of this thing during the Kennedy assassination coverage, and that's kind of neat to have. The funny thing is, this Channel 8 in Dallas was originally called KBTV, which is what it says on the bus. It's now called WFAA TV, but when it was called KBTV, a fellow from Kilgore, Texas owned it. So all Kilgore oil money paid for this. According to literature that we got, he paid $94,000 for this thing in 1948.
Hey, Chuck?
Yeah.
That Gates Yard 80 board brings back some really bad memories.
Well, if you like microphonic audio, it's perfect.
Yeah, that was the first board I ever used at WOHN, the Mighty 1440, at the first radio job I had in 1974.
It's not my favorite board. Let's put it that way.
No.
They aren't. I don't know. For some reason, you can almost talk into the thing without a microphone. I mean, the tubes in it are very microphonic, but it kind of is what it is, you know. So, but it at least looks the part. We got lots of TVs. I mean, there's a Zenith porthole, there's an RCA, and there's a Hoffman down at the end with its green screen. Several of these work. Some don't. We don't usually have this particular set of them connected up, but a few of these work. Some of these actually came from ETF not too long ago, from the silent auction or just the flea market. This is a Crosley, but it actually is an RCA 630 basically. It works pretty well. There's a Motorola down here and a Hallicrafters. People are astounded that people actually watch TVs like this. I'm sure you get the same thing at ETF when people come in and they go, well, I didn't know they look like that. But it is part of our history. You know, things like the Pilot TV, you know, people go, well, how'd you watch that? I go, well, you watch your phone, don't you? But that must have been quite something. Of course, they had magnifying glasses. In fact, I think that magnifying glass came from the silent auction at ETF. So thank you. There's a Sentinel and a Motorola and an RCA and a whole bunch more TV cameras, of course. We have a wide variety of radios too. This keeps changing all the time, but we have some very early ones that are quite unique, and many of these will work too. And things like Edison phonographs, you know, people are astounded when they hear an Edison phonograph work. I find it interesting that Edison, I don't know if he invented planned obsolescence or not, but he certainly knew about it. These original machines, this one's 1896, we think. It's not restored, but it works quite well, actually. And the original cylinders were 2 minutes. And he, in 1904, came out with a new improved 4-minute cylinder, which, guess what, will not play on this machine. And so you had to buy a new machine. I think Microsoft and Apple have all taken lessons from that. More TVs, it's RCA. This one's got channel 1 on it, so I guess that makes it 1947 or earlier. Once again, one of our models floating around. We actually had a photo shoot in here. We've had several. We'll rent the place out for whatever you want to use it for. And these were fashion model things that ended up in a magazine, local magazine. Philco projection TV and RCA projection TV beside it. We haven't had the guts to plug this RCA in and see what happens. This is our Berkshire. This is a fairly recent, and there's one at ETF, isn't there, Steve? I'm pretty sure you got one. They're a pretty unusual TV because I think 250 some odd were built. That's it. And it's $3,250 in 1948 money. Which was a bunch of money. And this one actually works. And it has not been restored either, which is kind of interesting. We got it from a guy who had it in his living room. He did work for RCA Service Company. And he ended up getting this thing. Apparently, he nursed it to life all the time when he was with RCA, and ended up getting it from the family that owned it in Dallas. They owned a liquor distributorship. I guess there was good money in liquor, because $3,250 was a lot of money back then. But there's the phonograph part of it working. And you know, changing to television is really fun, because it's got this interesting tuner that scrolls through all the bands, AM, FM, shortwave, and TV. And with any luck at all, my assistant will get out of the way here and we can open the door. And by that time, maybe the picture will come on. And I think we'll see Howdy Doody here in a second. There he is. It actually makes a pretty good picture when all things are said and done. We have something that's making gigantic interference. Well, actually, we know what it is. It's our exit signs. The LED exit signs make horrendous RF interference. And this thing's right underneath one, and it gets into the thing. If we pull the breaker on the exit sign circuit, everything clears up. I haven't figured out what to do for that, though.
What year was this set made?
48. 1948.
Great piece.
Yeah, it's quite a piece of furniture. Weighs 550 pounds roughly. We happen to have it sitting next to an exit door because that's really as far as we could drag it. We made a big mistake when we moved it in. We put it right up against the wall, and then we realized we had to plug it in and connect an antenna lead to it. So four of us dragged it out from the wall enough to where you get your arm back there to connect the antenna up. And we decided it looks pretty good 8 inches away from the wall, because pushing it back just doesn't seem like a whole lot of fun. But it is an ATV. You know, you could buy a couple of Buicks for what this cost, or probably a really modest house back then. I mean, $3,250 is a lot of money in 1948. So
It's 2 Chevrolets.
Well, surely 2 Chevrolets, but I think you can get a couple of Buicks. Depends which model, maybe, but you know, you could get a couple of good cars for sure. Because only the rich had them. Of course, only a couple hundred were ever sold, so 250, I think, something like that. Here's an oddity. We were talking about Dumont stuff. We have a new Dumont area because during COVID-19, we were shut down for 2 months rather. So we finished out an area that had been storage and made it kind of a Dumont repository. And this is a Dumont color film chain. They called it a multi-scanner. These, what look like projectors, are projectors sort of, except there's 3 photo multiplier tubes in here, one for red, one for green, and one for blue. And inside this box is a CRT, which Steve was kind enough to find one for us. And it's running at 39,000 volts inside it. So I think if you open the door, you might be X-rayed or something, but it reflects off of a mirror in here. This is at a 45-degree angle and into each of these 3 projectors. Actually, there's 4 because there's 2 slide projectors, and that provides the scanning. So it's a flying spot scanner system. They made a version of it that you could get that had another box on it that had an opaque projector basically in it with photo multiplier tubes. And you could also get this thing where you could open a door on the side, on this back side of it, shine this into your black studio that had somebody sitting in there to do the news, and the scanning lines would the light from the CRT would illuminate the person reading the news, and there were photo multiplier tubes in the studio as well. Now the problem was the studio was black, so they had strobe lights in the studio that came on during the vertical interval pulse, which must have been really great if you're epileptic. But that was your color TV station in a box, and you could buy this either color or black and white. And if you bought the black and white version, you could upgrade it to color later. You could buy more photo multiplier tubes. Kind of an interesting idea. There's Allen-B Dumont, another Dumont camera, Dumont TV. I'm not sure exactly which model that one is. And a bunch of Dumont CCUs, and also a Dumont oscilloscope, because Dumont had a lot to do with the development of the oscilloscope. We also added a new European radio and some TV department. This is a COVID-19 thing. We had nothing else to do but to start making more displays. Ever hear of a Raffina TV? I haven't. It's German, but it doesn't sound like a German name, but it was made in Germany. It's about our only European TV, although we do have we've got a couple of British cameras, a Pi and a Link, I think, in storage, and also this BBC Link ENG camera. We haven't figured out what you use for a viewfinder on it. That seems to be missing. This is our other TK41. This is a TK41C, and this one only uses one cable, but we have all this. We have the CCU and everything for it. So only a 6-foot tall rack full of stuff, plus an operator's console. This one even has a viewfinder hood, which is kind of unusual, and it has a zoom lens on it, which was really hot stuff back then. So
I've got a question about the 41C. Is that of the vintage where they replaced the optics with prisms? And also, is it still the tube video amps, or did it have the transistor amps?
This one has new Vistor amplifiers in it. A gentleman was talking about new Visters, and there's a new Vister preamp for each of the red, green, and blue. The rest of it is tube type, though. Nothing solid state. But the big advantage of this one was that you only had one camera cable coming out of the thing, which made it a lot friendlier if you're going to take this to a football game or something. I can't be bad enough. This is what they call TV81 cable, which is, about that big around. It's huge. And it must have been just unbelievable having to drag that through a stadium somewhere for hundreds of feet. I know that we've got some of it, and I can barely pick up a 25-foot length of it. I mean, it's that heavy. It's absolutely nuts. These guys must have been really burly guys that took this stuff out in the field. In the studio, it probably wouldn't be so bad, but it still took two guys to drag the cable around.
I've heard the story of one station that when they dropped the TK41s for Plumbicon cameras, at the end of the game, they took one of the ones that they had hauled all the way up to the top of the stadium and just tipped it over the side.
Well, I bet that destroyed whatever it landed on, because this sucker is heavy. There's no doubt about that. It would probably flatten several rows of chairs. You sure wouldn't want to be standing under it when it fell off the balcony of some stadium. But I can understand why people wanted to get rid of them. These got replaced a lot by Norelco PC60s, which were infinitely easier to move around for sporting events. Even RCA, like TK46, 45s and 46s were a big improvement over that. Incidentally, somebody mentioned Paul Beck a little earlier. This is Paul right over here. He came down to help us for a week, and we were actually working. It was actually a really neat week because Paul came down from New England. He's at the Museum of Broadcast Technology. And Chuck Ferris happened to pop in at the same time and brought a U-Haul truck full of stuff for us to try and sort through that we still haven't sorted completely through. But we found out where all the pan, tilt, zoom handles went and things like that. Chuck had them. Now we've got a lot of them. But it was a really fun week just having these guys down. Paul's a really great guy. He's a lot of fun to be around. So we have a working TV news set. This came out of a TV station in Longview, Texas that had been abandoned for about, since 2010, I think, is we figured it was when it was abandoned. Kids have a lot of fun with this. So do overserved adults when we have an event in here, because they can come here and be the newscaster or the weathercaster. And we have teleprompters on the cameras. These two Sony cameras are pretty new. They're actually, they came from Paul Beck, not Paul Beck. Oh, great. Just went blank on the guy's name. He's has a TV program called The Blaze. He's one of the talk show hosts kind of guys. But at any rate, he bought these cameras right before he had to go HD, and they make a really
Glenn
great
Beck.
picture. I'm sorry?
Glenn Beck.
No. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, Glenn Beck. You're right. That's exactly who it came from. He had three of them. He kept one for himself, and we got the other two. And they're really nice cameras, though. They really, really are. The HD versions look just like these, in fact, but the camera module itself is about the size of a can of shoe polish or something. The rest of it's just power supply and boxes and stuff. These kids are having a big time. The only thing that's not authentic about this is the microphones, but they use lavalier mics, but they would last about a minute and a half when we have a bunch of kids running around through the thing. So these are some Disposa mics, but they have a great time because they actually work. This thing came out of an abandoned TV station, as I mentioned. We had to cut it into little pieces to get it out the door because it wouldn't fit. And whoever put it together had no intention of it ever coming apart. And they used whatever hardware they had in the coffee can. So there was Phillips head screws, straight slot screws, nails, staples, all kinds of weird stuff, glue. It was miserable to take apart, but it was fun to put it back together. Actually, we were too stupid to take a picture of it put together. We actually did this in the dark because the station had been abandoned and it had no power. The the copper thieves had got in there and stolen all the wiring. So we had a generator and a couple of work lights to work with, and that was it. So we had a lot of fun taking it apart, but even more fun putting it back together, actually. But it was a good exercise. Here's a young man doing the weather. He looks a little, I'm not sure if he's real sure what he's looking at, but they can do the weather. They have a big time. We can do Harry Potter's cloaking device by covering them with a piece of green cloth. And now that Zoom has come along, it's not quite such magic as it was, but still everybody seems fascinated by it. So everybody has a lot of fun with it anyway. And having fun in the museum is a whole lot of what this is about, and trying to show kids that life wasn't quite like it is now. Moving over a little bit further, we go into a radio area. That's the Schaefer automation system, the big blue thing. That's where elevator music came from and radio stations back years ago. At one point, most stations, if they had an FM station, simulcasted their AM station on the thing. And the FCC one day said, well, you can't do that anymore. You're going to have 8 hours of local origination programming on your FM if you want to keep your license. So people bought those automation systems because it was cheaper than hiring disc jockeys. This audio console and so on came out of KLBJ Radio in Austin. The LBJ stands for Lady Bird Johnson, not Lyndon B, because it would have been a conflict of interest for the president to have a radio station, but the first lady could. She also owned the only TV station in Austin. What a coincidence, you know. I mean, I just here tape cartridges, lots of them.
Hey, don't knock those Schaefer automation systems. The one at WFVA in Fredericksburg, Virginia, kept me in beer and date money, to be polite about it, for 2 years.
Well, you know, I mean, somebody had to fix it. Somebody had to load it. And when they go bad, some places nobody had ever noticed that it had gone bad. You know, the tape had broken or something, and there's tape all over the floor, or it's eating tapes, or a tape cartridge stuck in the carousel or something. That was pretty festive because it'd break it right in half.
Or becoming a local WWV. That was what got me my first job with them. Was really? It kept counting every minute on the minute.
Oh, great. Okay. Well, this one has 2 tape recorders that shuttle back and forth between even and odd minutes, and one will be queued up. So whenever it was time for a time break, but there were various versions of this, you know, that worked. Here's a different view of that control room.
This one had 2 of the biggest cartridges I'd ever seen.
They made some really big ones. They were like 1 hour cartridges, and that they were gigantic. You know,
these were huge.
Yeah, they were pretty big, at least about the size of an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper or so. Not every cart machine could take that. These wouldn't, but some of the old top loaders would. Funny thing, I did a presentation, showed this picture to some broadcast engineers for another Zoom conference. The funny thing, they really like this remote control more than anything. This is what everybody zoomed in and focused on. Can't believe it. You know, it's like we've got so much other stuff. This is another radio studio. The audio console in the middle is an RCA from about 1936. It came from WOAI in San Antonio. Jay Leno was part of the packing with a videotape machine that somebody sent us. There's a 1,000-watt RCA transmitter from the 1950s. And next to it is a high-definition TV, analog TV, an RCA. This prototype. It had it had a satellite receiver in it. And this analog system needed 2 TV channels for bandwidth. So on satellite, that was possible. On over the air, it wasn't. Every radio station had AP or UPI wire service machines. This is where you got your news. It had a continuous loop of, or a continuous piece of fanfold paper. Then you come in the morning and there'd be paper all over the floor, and you had to go rip and read, as they called it, where you go take a ruler and rip off your stories. It was always a lot of fun when you got about halfway through the story and it went into gibberish where it didn't make any sense at all. And the usual initiation at radio stations, and I think they even did this on WKRP in Cincinnati, which incidentally is a documentary about radio. It's not really a comedy at all. somebody would sneak in the newsroom while the guy's reading the news and light his script on fire with a Bic lighter or something similar. And if the guy survived that, he was going to be okay. We have some video projectors. That's a GE Talaria, which is a very bizarre projector. It uses an oil bath to make a picture. The middle one with the big glad to see you kind of lens there is a Barco from the 1980s or so. And the one on the very left is a Barco from the 1990s. These all work. The Talaria takes about an hour to warm up. It's very interesting. If there's a tube in there, it's kind of like a CRT, except it's filled with oil. And if you tilt this thing more than about 15 degrees, you ruin the tube. It goes down the neck of the tube, and you have to get a new one. I watched one of these fall off of a balcony at a Dr. Pepper convention during a rehearsal day. Thank God it was rehearsal, but it's about $75,000 or something. I don't know if it's that much, maybe 25, but they were very expensive in their day. This Barco makes an incredibly good picture, and it's actually HD. But we decided we'd watch a movie on it right after we got it, and all of a sudden we're going, it's really hot in here. And the thing was like having an electric dryer running in your room with the door open on the thing. It's just stupidly hot. This is the RCA TV, and this is an analog high definition monitor. And for the longest time, we didn't have anything to put into it. But as you see, it's working there. And that's because somebody gave us this camera, which is serial number 004 from Sony. It's an analog high definition camera. And somebody sent me an email and said, would you like it? And I said, well, yeah, sure. He said, well, there's a catch. You got to take a TV. And it was that RCA prototype TV that was actually shot. A commercial was shot for RCA using this camera. It's on YouTube and it looks absolutely awful. It's in like 320p or something like that. It's putrid looking video. But this thing makes pretty good video. But anyway, he said you had to take the TV. So I sent one of our volunteers and a 14-year-old kid to go pick the thing up, thinking, well, the camera's not bad. A TV, what could that be? Well, that TV weighs about 350 pounds. It was upstairs in the guy's house in a spare bedroom, and he was moving. And that's why he wanted to get rid of this stuff. And they haven't forgiven me yet, just because of the weight. It was pretty serious getting it down the stairs.
Chuck,
people ask, yeah.
Yeah, one thing about the early days of broadcasting, even into the 70s regarding that AP teleprinter, it was also not uncommon for some of the more, shall we say, busted budget broadcasters not to pay the UPI or AP bill on time, or less seriously, you would have a situation where the machine ran out of paper overnight.
Mm-hmm.
And the former problem, that is not paying the UPI bill, got me one Sunday morning. I rolled into the station at 5:45 to sign on at 6. Found that, yeah, the machine was working, but Beatty hadn't paid the bill. So I went and dashed out for a copy of the Sunday Washington Post at the nearest 7-Eleven that was open. And brought that back, and it brought new meaning to the term rip and read.
Absolutely, especially the way newspapers are laid out. But that wasn't uncommon to just take it out of the newspaper because we can't afford to pay for UPI or AP.
The worst time that happened, there were two really bad occasions. One was the day after the Grammys, and I didn't have time to go to 7-Eleven for a newspaper. So, and the reason why I remember this was I ended up playing in a 15-minute newscast a repeat of Olivia Newton-John's I Honestly Love You, which was the #1 song in the Grammys the preceding night. I made that part of the news. The other time it was really bad was I got a phone call from our news director about maybe 5 hours into my 6-hour shift. And Norm goes and says, why aren't you covering the plane crash? And I said, what plane crash? He said, TWA 727 went into a mountain out near Purcellville. And like I said, that was on one of the days where the owner of the station had failed to pay the UPI bill, so we ended up winning it with whatever we could catch off of WMAL.
Can we get back to Chuck's presentation?
Well, broadcasters are notoriously cheap, so yeah, we'll go back.
I'm sorry about that, Bill.
People ask where we get some of this stuff, and one of the things we do is I've partnered with the Museum of Broadcast Technology. That's Paul Beck again over here, and we go to NAB and set up in the lobby of the North Hall, right next to the AARL people, and we get a lot of stuff comes this way. These two cameras came out of Yankee Stadium. They're now in the Texas Broadcast Museum. This is all the CCUs for them and stuff. Excuse me. One day I was sitting there at the little booth, and this big hulking guy named Larry Silva comes out the door and says, "Hey, would any of you guys like one of ESPN's original TV mobile units?" And Paul Beck and Tom look at each other and go, "Well, we don't have any place to put it. Maybe Chuck does." So I've spent about a year and a half on the phone with this guy with a good New York accent. And we ended up with an ESPN truck, which is this thing. His company was called Cruise Line, but you can see where it said ESPN on the side at one time. This thing has been a nightmare. Be careful what you accept, because you may have to deal with it. We tried to have this thing. It had been parked since about 2010, and it was full of junk inside. It was horrible. And we got it running. We got a DOT inspection on it and got things working pretty well on it, and thought we could get it driven down here by a trucking company. Well, they sent a guy to pick it up that had never driven a stick shift, and he ripped the clutch out of it somewhere in just outside of New York City on Interstate 95. Sometime it cost us $950 to have it towed off to a truck repair place. Luckily, those truck repair place was really nice folks. And they said, well, we could probably get this thing, make it to New Jersey or so, but that's probably about it. If you're going to Texas, forget it. You're going to be on a hook. So I said, well, let's put a new clutch in it. And the closest one they could find was in El Paso. And we're doing this in the fall because the tires on the thing, who knows, they're from the Maypop company, I guess. Just a question of when. And we figured that doing it in the summer wouldn't be a really great idea. So we waited till the fall to move it. And I'm kind of getting worried that it might snow up there, because it does, and around Thanksgiving, here comes the snow. Even after the end of even Halloween can be pretty cold. So I said, okay, well, let's just air freight this clutch in. It was in El Paso, so we added more expense to it, and they got it put in, and it was going to be a couple of weeks till the truck driver could come and pick it up. And this time we specified one that knows how to drive a 5-speed manual transmission and a 2-speed rear end. And they couldn't come up with anybody real quick. So it's going to be a couple of weeks. And in that couple of weeks, it snowed. I got a call from the trucking company, from the truck repair place. And they said, well, we got about 3.5 feet of snow, and snowplows plowed you in pretty good. We might be able to get it out. And so we're waiting for the truck driver to come, and he's delayed. And finally, the guy calls me from the truck place again and says, well, I got bad news for you. He said, it snowed again last night, and we got another 3 or 4 feet of snow. And now you're not moving until the spring thaw. So sorry. But he said, they were nice. They were really nice folks, actually. And they said that we won't charge you for storage or anything. It's fine. We know what kind of situation you're in, and we'll work with you. And so when it finally thawed out, like early April or something, they got it out, and then found out that the turbocharger has now locked up on this thing. It's a diesel, and it will not go over 45 miles an hour. And they said, we're not equipped to fix this, and we don't know who is, because it's an antique. We don't do antiques. And it's 1979. Actually, it's a 78 truck, but it was used first in 79. But at any rate, they said, you're just going to have it moved by a trailer. So it ended up going with a heavy equipment hauler. When you put this on this trailer, I mean, this is really the truck and trailer. That's the tractor for it, which had a huge sleeper on it, and it had 4 rear axles. We luckily had a forklift truck, so we could lift up one of them. But Anyway, this thing is the truck itself is 13 feet 6 inches tall, and then you put it on the trailer, and now you're up to 15 feet or so, 15 and a half feet, and you're not legal. So it had to have permits and escorts and route planning with every state police and stuff. So it cost a fortune to get it down here. When we finally got it here, the truck driver was really great. He drove this thing through downtown Kilgore, which just amazed me that he could do it. I would have wiped out many parked cars and stuff. This is right in front of the museum. And at any rate, we got it off and got it around back. We have a parking area in the back and put it there and tried to clean it out a little bit. And it was really super hot by this point. It's June or something. And we couldn't really stand it for more than a few minutes in the thing. Couldn't figure out how to make the air conditioning work because the thermostat was missing, among other things. And it was full of junk. So we kind of put that off to the fall, and it rained all that fall, which made it even worse. So finally I said, well, let's bring this thing inside and we can just have a exhibit on work in progress. People think it's interesting. So we went to move it inside, and that's when we found out it wouldn't go through our door. Actually, we had two doors that had to be modified to clear the thing. So it's the gift that keeps on giving. It still does. This is what it looked like inside. There's they threw all their junk in here when the camera would stop working, or a videotape machine or something. They just throw it in here for spare parts. So it smelled just god awful inside this thing. But this is what it looks like today. Actually, it looks a little bit better than this today because we've made some progress since this picture was taken. But we've got ESPN livery on this side. They made 3 of these things, about $1 million a piece, actually. Made by a company called Compact Video in California. Inside, the control room looks like this. It's got a Grass Valley switcher and some effects generators and a whole bunch of RTS intercom. And actually, we've got more stuff working now than was when this picture's probably maybe 6 months or a year, probably a year old or so. The audio console originally was made by Neve in England, but this one is a Yamaha PM 2000, which is a popular console back in the 80s. The Neve got sold when the truck was sold by ESPN to the people, and they put this in instead. But it actually works. And then another mobile unit has followed me home. This is a 1972 Gerstenschlager, and it came out of, it's not on exhibit at the museum yet, but it will be. This came out of Syracuse, New York, and it was owned by the University of Syracuse. It's 1972 and it has 4,400 miles on it. That's it. And those are the original tires. They only drove it around campus, apparently. It's fully equipped and it works. Everything seems to work more or less in it. It's not original equipment. It was updated. It has Hitachi cameras in it, but it's an interesting beast. It even has an air conditioner that works. And then we also have an ENG van, which I also use in my radio station. This one came from NBC in Los Angeles. I didn't really know what I was doing. I made a lowball bid on eBay one day and didn't think anything of it, but I thought one of these might be kind of cool to have. And well, about 6 weeks later, I'm checking my email. My wife and I are watching TV. It says, "Congratulations, you've won auction number something or other." I'm going, "Oh, swell." It cost me more to get it here than I paid for it. But it's actually a pretty good truck. It was in very, very good condition. So people think that's kind of interesting too. But the whole point of all this is to show kids and everybody something about our past. I mean, that's really the whole idea is, and we like having classes. This is, I'm not sure what group this is, but we have lots of groups that come through, and it's fun giving tours, and it's fun watching their eyes open up because they just really don't know. I mean, the generation like this little blonde kid, he's got no idea what I'm talking about with Kennedy assassination or anything. And we have school groups come in. We also have the best ones, actually, oddly enough, are homeschool kids. We'll have groups of those that are organized, and those kids are really smart. I when they first came out with the idea of homeschooling, I thought, oh, this could be really bad because, how are you going to regulate what these kids learn and, whether they know how to add 2 and 2 together and stuff. But those kids, apparently it's good parenting, I guess, because those kids turn out to be really good and really inquisitive. So here's a few of our volunteers. This is Warren Willard. He's the guy who likes the heavy mahogany things. And And Phil over here is our repair guy. He can fix just about anything. And this is 10 RCA TK 45 and 46 cameras, well, mostly 46s, that came out of New England originally. They were owned by Emerson University, and Paul Beck used to own these. But a guy just brought these to us one day in a truck and said, "You want these?" You know, so he wanted to get them out of storage. This is one of our storage areas right here. We've actually had to expand into a second building. This is down the street a couple of blocks. This used to be the old newspaper office. It's actually originally was a Chrysler dealership, and we're just using it for storage at this point. But we got a lot of stuff, as you can see. These are not particularly good pictures because the lighting was pretty awful in the place. But these were taken day before yesterday, so it's pretty much the mess that it looks like. Old videotape machines come to retire here. We have lots of them. If you need one, we can fix you right up. There's lots of stuff here, though. It scares me. It's a 8,500 square foot building, and it's getting full. And that is very, very scary. It's kind of like cleaning out your attic. It's like, oh my God. Every time I go in here, though, I see something that I go, I didn't know we had one of these. So it's been an interesting experience, and the whole thing's been quite an experience. Here's the TV monitor row. Yeah, we got your TV monitors if you need one, and just a little bit more of the view. This is just the front room of this building. It goes on forever, and it looks like this throughout. We've even installed an elevator. There's an attic in the thing, and we've one of our volunteers is a really good welder. He used to make trailers for a living. And he has built lifts, dumbwaiter lifts for us, so we can get stuff up to the second floor. Because the museum has a second floor. We have an electronic shop. I don't have pictures of it, but we have an electronic shop upstairs, and it helps us get heavy things up and down. We also have this boardroom, and my office is this was actually taken from sitting at the desk that I have. But we also have a library, and we actually expanded this. These 3 file cabinets are now in another room. They're full of Sam's PhotoFax. We have several sets of writer manuals, which are handy, but we've expanded this with more bookshelves going down the wall. And there's more bookshelves on the other wall. And we could use more wall space because we got a whole lot of manuals and stuff. In fact, this closet is all full of manuals that we don't even know what they are. Organizing this is not real easy. So anyway, at least it's preserved. So the bottom line is, when are you guys coming? We're open Fridays and Saturdays. Love to see you. And we'll even open at other times if you're coming. If we know you're coming, we don't mind, especially for people who are enthusiastic about this stuff.
And is it tax deductible?
Yes, we're a 501c3, so it's tax deductible. We had a very successful, despite the fact we didn't have any events last year, which is one of the things we count on. We had a very successful end of year fundraising, which made things okay again. And we also qualified for a paycheck protection plan because we have one employee who is well underpaid, but she does yeoman's duty as the operations manager, is her title, and she does everything. She's kind of like the den mother, because all the guys that go here, this started out as kind of a good old boys club. Let's go down on Saturday and play with some old TVs or something, and it's turned into something much more than that. But she feeds us and makes sure we go do things and stuff. So it's well worth it. And paycheck protection helped with that one too. So we're doing okay. This will never be a moneymaker, but if we can pay we actually own the building, which is the good news. It was partially donated to us, and we had to spend a bunch of money getting it up to code. And the current Snowmageddon, as they call it, we had fire sprinklers break here and at the annex and at my house. So I'm no longer I wasn't a big fan of fire sprinklers, but now I am really not, because they make more. The mess they make is worse than if it burned up. It's still ruined one way or the other. So it's a pain in the neck. My house got an inch of water inside it when I put a fire sprinkler system in it when we built it, because we weren't real convenient to a fire station, and there's no hydrant in front of our house. So I thought this would be a good idea, and at the time building a house, it wasn't that expensive, but it's turned out to be very expensive now. Luckily, I got insurance, but it'll be 3 months or so before we're back to normal in our house. It's great. So anyway, that's what I know for now, but I'd be happy to entertain any questions you got, or we can just have a general discussion, whatever. I'll turn it back to Dave.
Well, Chuck, thanks very much. That was fascinating. Not only the museum, but the time you spent talking about your history. I knew nothing about you.
Well,
now,
most people don't, so that's why I pulled that up, because
Yeah.
I have a weird past. I mean, there's no doubt about that.
Right.
But I've been incredibly lucky in life and lived
Yeah.
through many things that I probably shouldn't have when we were on the road. Because
I can imagine.
well, I mean, it used to be, we did the show, then we drove all night,
Right.
in a Ryder rent truck or something to the next venue, and didn't sleep or anything. And
Yeah.
I remember one weekend I just got back. I'd done a 30-day James Taylor tour in 30 days of Cat Stevens. And I got back, the day I got back into the office, they said, don't unload the truck. You're going to New Orleans tonight to do Alice Cooper. I'm going, great. Just what I wanted to know, because I was really looking forward to sleeping. And so we got in the truck and drove to New Orleans, and found out that the next night was in Orlando, Florida, which was a not real convenient drive, to say the least. And this is before the interstates were finished. And then the next night was in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And you go, who in the hell figured this out? I mean, we were punch drunk by the time we got to Baton Rouge. So.
Well, we're sort of toward the end, unless anybody's got something they want to ask Chuck.
I don't want to ask Chuck anything, but I'm reminding him that I visited his museum several years ago, and I was really impressed then. But these pictures today, there's more to it, and it just goes on and on.
It keeps growing. It's kind of like, I remember you did visit, and it's kind of like chewing bubble gum. It keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger, And I don't know where all the stuff comes from. It actually has got me kind of scared, because it's kind of hard to say no to somebody. I'm getting better at it, but it's hard to say no. I got an email from somebody yesterday on our website that wanted to give us somewhere in the vicinity, didn't have a good count, of 20 TVs from the 1990s and 2000s, CRT TVs. I'm going, no, not at all. We just can't do that. And every now and then somebody will back a pickup truck up to the front door of the thing, and there's a whole bunch of black plastic Magnavox TVs sitting there, the kind you see along the side of the road, because they don't want to pay the recycling fee, and I don't either. There's a bunch of stuff out there that people think is really valuable, but it's not. Now, the good news, as was pointed out earlier today, is that that some of the younger people can take those TVs and do something with them, get them interested in this. And that's important, but there's a point where you just can't store more stuff. And I don't want to have to pay recycling fees on it either. I think Best Buy gets about $25 to get rid of your old TV now.
Well, thank you, Chuck, again. I hope to get down there.
You need to.
Don't get to Texas very often, but
well, you're in Colorado. I mean, half of
you're
Texas
right.
is in
It's not that
Colorado.
far. Yeah, right. All right. Yeah. Well, good meeting, everybody.
Let me in. I think that I am the only foreigner in this session. I'm from Uruguay. My name is Horatio Negro. My call sign is CX3 Bravo Zulu. I'm a amateur radio operator, but I am fond of all history of media and radio history and of sort of things related. The brief things I want to tell you is that here in my country, Uruguay, in South America, we have a sort of dramatic effort to retrieve the first camera that was used for cable TV. This camera was homemade, experimental way by a Uruguayan named Juan Eugenio Oviol. In English, we would say John Eugene Oviol, who was born in January 1916. He built a camera for cable communication, cable TV, and make experiences in 1943. He used RCA camera 1847, and he used his wife for the test exhibitions, and made some exhibitions in Lyceum and university building with the studios of a local medium wave station here, important radio station, which is CX16 Radio Caribe in Montevideo. He also linked by cable, let me see, from the municipal velodrome, images from the municipal velodrome. The point is that the camera of Oviol was preserved with some missing in pieces at the headquarters and studios of CX16 Caribe Radio in a petit museum in the building and in Montevideo. We took photographs, and now, some months ago, the station moved his studios and administration office to another building. And this camera, which was in exhibition, is almost lost because it's on sale on eBay, like a website in the internet. And he is asking 25,000 pesos, about $1,500, or along with a security box. This security box, the safe deposit box, was also part of Radio Caribe, and he's selling. And if he sells this camera, we are losing important piece of history. And I contacted the Heritage president, the president of the Heritage Commission here, dependent of the Education Ministry, and it's been 3-4 months without notice of this. So this is a dramatic effort here to save this camera for a museum. That's the point and alert of this matter here in my country. Thank you very much for this very interesting meeting, and my salute to all of members of the Early Television Museum.
Oh,
thank you very much.
Good luck with your quest to get the camera back. And if you have anything that is written or photographs, I'd love to put it on our website.
Yes, I have. I have a web page and a web article about this in my blog. I will send the link for it in the chat window.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Hey, Chuck, Conrad, this is Joanna. I have a question. You have so much stuff, and that was an incredible tour and sharing that you did. We have a question. Is there anything that you don't have that you would like to have?
Oh, sure. Mechanical color TVs would be interesting. Actually, one of the mechanical color TV converters, can't remember the name of the thing right offhand. ETF's got a couple of them, and in fact gave one away as a
Colortel.
prize. I'm sorry, yeah, Colortel, that's it. We'd love to have one of those. We don't have much early stuff. I mean, ETF is the king of early mechanical TVs and bizarre, weird TVs. I mean, Kuba Comet would be really cool to have. I know where there is one, but it's in Hilliard. But I'm glad it's in Hilliard. You know, the museums have different tacks, and you know, ours is just to kind of amuse and entertain. We've actually become more of a museum about the history of entertainment technology. We were recently given an audio console that was built by my old friend Shoko shortly after I left. It was built in 1973, hand built because you couldn't buy this stuff, and it was used by it was built for James Taylor specifically, but it was used by Jackson Browne. If you ever listen to the Jackson Browne Rolling on Empty album, it was recorded on this thing with a Studer recorder. Willie Nelson used it. The Eagles used it. The Rolling Stones used it. I got pictures of Paul McCartney sitting at it, drinking a beer. It's really well traveled, and it works. It's amazing. It's been in storage for 25 years. The guy who designed it gave it to us, and we took it out of the road case that was in. And I mean, it had all kinds of stickers all over. It's been all around the world. Turn it on, it worked. Pretty amazing. Still working too. But you know, so we've got more into that kind of thing. Not necessarily that's good, bad, or indifferent. It's just different. And we have a lot of hands-on stuff. We'll let kids play with the TV camera and stuff. They're not going to hurt it. We got an ENG camera. We got tons of them, so you know we don't mind if they drop it. It's not the end of the world. But there's always things that would be interesting that would mesh well with what we have on display. But I can't really tell you right offhand what we'd like. But you're sure welcome to send me an email. We have a pretty good website. There's a lot of me on it, just doing videos because we seem to post those every time we do a video of some kind on it. But there's an email link, or you can send it to Chuck at TXMBC, which stands for Texas Museum of Broadcasting and Communications, our legal name. Anyway, if you know of something that you go, man, these guys really need one of these, let me know. I'm always interested.
Okay, let's call it a night. Thanks.
I have a quick question if you have time.
Sure.
Sure.
I'm going to be this is Greg. I'm outside Philadelphia. I've been to the museum, which was a treat in my life. I'm going to be graduating from radios to TV very shortly in repairing. I have 5 ATS-30s, which I'm going to push to side because they look so densely populated. I did find an AT-241. What would you say the common issues I should look for in repairing that? And what would be the skill level from radio to TV?
Well, on TVs, keep one hand in your pocket while you're probing around with things because the voltage is pretty serious on some of them. I got the shock of my life when I was working at a TV shop when I was in high school. I was working on an Emerson color TV that was had a metal picture tube, and the thing was on the bench. And I remember Bozo the Clown was on in color, and I had just adjusted the high voltage to precisely 25,000 volts, like the SAM said to do. And I'd recently got my senior class ring from high school. And the last thing I remember was seeing a spark jump about 6 or 8 inches from the metal picture tube that apparently the insulation didn't hold up very well on to my senior class ring. And a half hour later, I woke up outside. I was outside the building. I was all alone in the building. The boss was off doing a service call or something. And I was in my shirt sleeves and it was snowing outside. And I was aimlessly walking around the parking lot in the back. So be careful. The same things go bad in TVs, though, that go bad in radios. It's, power supply filter caps is the first place to start looking. I recommend, and I'm sure everybody will agree, to ramp the thing up slowly with a Variac or something, or even a 150 watt light bulb in series with it. It's not a bad idea. But look for bad capacitors. You're going to find that. Test all the tubes. Look for, sockets that are corroded and aren't making good connection. there's weird things in TVs. Tuners are usually a problem. Some tuner cleaner doesn't hurt. Contact cleaner works. But it's pretty similar. It's just bigger. That's all. If you can get a Sam's photo fact of it, that will help you a lot because they and they're still available online. But they show you what waveforms and what voltages, more importantly, you're going to have or you should be looking for. So if you've got a tube that's got a grid voltage that's a positive voltage, there's probably a problem there, and maybe you've got a bad capacitor feeding it. The things are pretty common. The early printed circuit boards are kind of a pain in the neck to work on, especially in the Predictas. In fact, they're one of the hardest TVs to work on, I think, in the universe, but that's just me. I'm sure somebody else has other opinions here. But
I have been criticized by people because my opinion has always been 9 times out of 10, it's just as easy as working on a radio, but it's the 10th one that's going to kill you.
Well, that's true. You're right about that. It's there's one that's the dog of the week, and you'll just go crazy trying to figure it out. I mean, just like earlier with the color TV, with the tubes that have a bad winding on the transformer and they're glowing too bright. Who would think that? I mean, weird stuff happens. I mean, the stuff's old.
All right, well, stay tuned. So that's going to be my next venture.
Okay, great. Well, thanks everybody for participating, and we'll see you next month.
Okay, and I'll keep it open. If people want to hang around and talk, you're welcome to, or you can all, go get some dinner and go to bed. Whatever works.
Right.
I'm going to eat some chips here because I haven't eaten dinner yet.
I'm eating dinner right now, even as you speak. Okay.
Okay.
Good night.
So, everybody.
All right. Have a good evening.
Yeah, I took a look at the ATS-30 and I said, oh my God, that's like a megapolis compared to all the room that you have in a 241. So I figured that would be a good place to start.
Chuck, what's the status of your Dumont color system? Is it working?
No, it is not. I think it's a long way from working. We did actually, Steve actually had one of the CRTs for it though, which was pretty amazing. And we can at least make it look like it's going to work. It's pretty far gone, frankly. And I'm not sure I really want to mess around with something that's got 39,000 volts on it anyway. I'm sure it'd be the only one working if we ever got it working. Because I don't think, as far as I can tell, they only made 45 or 50 of these things.
Paul Beck, I was surprised. He found some ads that were selling, we've sold our 100th system in the magazine. And so I was shocked that they had sold that many. I didn't think that many color stations were running local film back then, but I guess they did. I know I've personally worked on the GE flying spot scanner film chain, and I know a station in a town where I worked had a Philco flying spot scanner film chain. It had Mitchell projectors on it. The GE had Eastman, Kodak continuous motion projectors, all those like yours. They can't use us intermittent like a regular film projector. They have to have a dissolve effectively from one frame to the other because of the flying spot system.
Well, these are modified Jan projectors, and I thought they would be Bell and Howells, but actually these are made by DeVry, and they were highly modified, of course, to do this.
Yeah, they've got a rotating prism in there, I think, instead of a shutter.
That's right.
Because they're continuous motion. The GEs, if you look through the lens of them, they looked like they were doing a dissolve from one frame to the other. But the light was always up. The light never went away. And I worked on a lot of those Jan type projectors. They were made by several different companies. And in television service, they tended to fly apart. They just weren't built like the TP66 RCA or the Eastman machines that were made for broadcast use when you used them, 18 hours a day.
Right. I worked at, when I first got out of college, before I went to work for Showco, I worked at a company that had decided they wanted to go in the industrial video business and build a video studio. And and a duplicating facility and a film transfer facility, and we had Jan projectors, and they just didn't. It was not a good thing. It just really wasn't. I'd worked at stations that had real projectors, and there was a huge difference. But these things are. It's kind of an interesting idea, because I thought. Now, Paul Beck sent me an ad that was for WBZ that bought the 45th one, and I grew up around Boston, and I don't remember. Of course, we didn't have a color TV, so how would I know? But I had no idea that they were broadcasting anything in color, because they were doing this. Actually, Dumont had a color system. It was an industrial color system using field sequential system. I've seen ads for it from 1948 or so. Pretty interesting stuff. And actually, it was 525 line 30 frames, which might have been compatible, but apparently it used too much bandwidth.
Hey, Chuck, repeat your email address again.
Okay, you can send it to Chuck, CHUCK, at TXMBC, Mary Baker Charlie, .org, O-R-G.
So Tom X-ray.
Yep.
Mary Boy Charles.
Correct. .org, .org.
Got it, and not .com. Yeah, I got that.
Not .com, .org. And you can go to our website. You can find me through the website too. It's pretty easy. You can go to texasbroadcastmuseum.com or .org, either one, and also txmbc.org. All three of those work, and take you to our website.
That Dumont field sequential color system actually ran at 3 times NTSC rate. And I believe ETF has a Dumont monitor and a converter, and it's working.
Really? I hadn't seen that. I tend to like Dumont stuff for some reason. It seems to have attracted to me for whatever reason. I think they're a very innovative company, and probably highly underrated these days. Most people don't know much about them. It's the forgotten network, for instance. I remember as a kid watching the Dumont stuff. They had Fulton J. Shield, I think it was that was his name? A Catholic priest that they put on their network opposite Milton Berle, and it actually got ratings.
Fulton Sheen, S-H-E-E-N.
Yeah, you're right. Fulton J. Sheen, that was it. And yeah, he was, if I'm not mistaken, he was really guilty of overacting a lot. You know, but he had quite an audience. So, you know, what can I say?
They're still showing reruns on what is it? The religious EWTN.
EWTN.
Yeah.
Well, we used Bishop Sheen as the closing in our first issue of the video magazine. That would be in the 70s.
Really? Wow. Well, I remember as a kid, because I had a babysitter when I was a kid that liked him a lot. And so that would be on our Philco TV in our living room. And she'd be sitting there watching it. And I think right after that, they had wrestling, which was what she was really waiting for. Wrestling, I think they called it.
So it seems Dumont was such a big player in the early 50s. What happened that they disappeared?
They were undercapitalized. They never had the capital, and they didn't have the star power. You know, NBC and CBS already had stars, you know, like Jack Benny and Milton Berle and things like that. Because due to their radio presence, and Dumont never had any radio presence whatsoever. So they just kind of ran out of money, I think. And I think they probably, like a lot of companies, got too big too fast, because you tend to do a lot of things. I mean, the way I understand it, at least, is Alan Dumont wanted to sell TV sets back in the 1930s. And they came to the realization that if you needed something to watch, if you're going to buy this really expensive piece of furniture, his stuff was not cheap. And so he started a TV network. And of course, to do the TV network, you got to build the equipment to make it. So we started selling that, and you know, one thing kind of led to another, and I think they kind of got overextended. the Dumont network actually turns out to be the grandfather of the Fox network. When Dumont went out of business, a company called Metro Media bought all their stations and their network. And they actually continued to use the Dumont Electronicam up till about 1960 or so. But Metro Media finally sold out to Fox. So, you know, I guess you could say Dumont is the grandfather of the Fox network. Bruce Dumont has who's the nephew of Alan Dumont, has a museum in Chicago. It's mostly, when I visited, it was mostly about Chicago TV, but it's a good museum. And, you know, he's probably the closest connection you'll find.
My grandmother was a big fan of both Bishop Sheen and the wrestling programs.
Well, it was a big deal. I know the last program that ran on the Dumont TV network was a wrestling match. So, and I actually ran camera at Channel 11 in Dallas doing wrestling back about 1968 or so, 69, something like that. And it is fake, incidentally. Most people don't know that ring is more like a trampoline. So when they slam you down on it, you just bounce back up. In fact, in my sound reinforcement days, we used to do the local wrestling arena in Dallas was a place called the Sportatorium. And we used to do black gospel shows sometimes in there. And it was kind of funny because they put a band on top of this wrestling ring. And it would usually involved, these were usually black events and gospel events. And there'd be 4 or 5 ladies in their gowns and robes and stuff, you know, choir robes, and they'd be bouncing right up and down, you know, in time with the music. And it was kind of funny to watch that. And the mic stands are all going like this, and the cymbals are going everywhere. Because you know, when there was about 1,000 pounds bouncing up and down on your ring, it made quite a vibration, to say the least. But I remember they used to chase themselves around and beat themselves with folding chairs and stuff. I was summer relief and didn't do very many of the wrestling matches, but they were pretty much staged. I already knew that they were going to go, that Wahoo McDaniel was going to go chase somebody else around the ring with a folding chair in his hand and try and beat him on the head with the thing. And then they go out and have a beer afterwards.
This was all fake. I'm just devastated.
Who would have thought? You know, I mean, it's just one of those things. I was crushed when I found out. Mrs. Knox, my babysitter, would have just spun in her grave if she'd known.
It was huge in Los Angeles in the late 50s on Channel 5. There was a guy named Dick Lane, whose famous phrase was, "Whoa, Nelly," every time somebody would slam onto the mat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and he bounced right back, I'm sure. I've heard the name Dick Lane before, in association with Los Angeles